Hello, I'm Derek Arden and welcome to Monday Night Live. Today I've got an old friend of mine, somebody I met 12 years ago at a charity event when I was speaking for that charity, Mike Clare. Mike's been fascinated by charities and helped charities ever since he sold the retailer Dreams, which he sold for £200 million in 2008. Mike also has 3 forts in the Solent. One's a hotel, and I want to ask him about that later. Mike, thanks for joining us. Welcome to Monday Night Live. Where did the story start, Mike? How did you get into bed retailing?
Well, I'm glad to be with you, Derek, and it's really interesting. I'm going to be, I think, live every Monday at 5 p.m. now. It's a new thing for me. How did I get into bed retailing? Well, it's very difficult. It wasn't a plan. I didn't sort of leave school and think, right, what I want to do is start a bed empire. You sort of drift a bit, and I didn't really know what I was doing. I did actually join a furniture retailer when I was 21, and they put me in charge of the mattress department. But then I was only there for about 6 months, and I moved on to office furniture. So I did actually, I suppose, come back to something that I'd known. I always say I went to Wickham University, which is a furniture town. Maybe that's got something to do with it. But the thing is, I've always bought and sold things. So when I was at school, I bought and sold bikes, LPs, albums or whatever they were then. I used to buy and sell tents because just got into these frame tents, and I'd know how much they were, and I'd buy secondhand ones and sell them for more than I bought them for. To me, retailing is, it's quite simple. If you make something, you've got product design, all sorts of manufacturing issues. It's just, some people make a success of manufacturing, but retailing seems easy. So if you're going to retail something that everyone's got. So everyone's got a bed. Most people spend a third of their life in bed. Most people are born in a bed. Most people die in a bed. Most people are conceived in a bed. So, bed's a pretty important thing in your life. And the only problem with beds is they're big bloody things. So you've got to have big showrooms that take up a lot of space, and you've got to deliver them to people. But apart from that, they haven't got technology. They haven't really got any fashion element to them or anything like that. And it's just a block of bloody wood and foam and springs that if you can get it right, then you buy them for a few £100 and you sell them for twice the price, in essence. So when people come to me with problems, and when I was running Dreams, and I said, look, we're doing such a simple business. All we're doing is we're buying beds and we're selling them for more than we bought them for. It couldn't be any simpler business. So, I'm not a complicated person. So being simple is, I suppose, one of the reasons I started Dreams.
That's a great learning point. But hang on, wasn't your first shop in Hillingdon just one shop? And you need cash to keep opening shops, don't you?
Well, not always. I mean, to be honest, if you take the customer's deposit up front and then you haven't paid the manufacturer for 4 weeks after they've delivered it to you, there actually a positive cash flow can come from that. I'm not suggesting that's exactly the right way of running a business, but it's not as negative as it first seems. In those days, in the late 80s when I started, if you whatever money you'd got, the banks would double near enough, as long as you put your house on the line. I reckon I needed 20 grand. I only had about 2 or 3. I sold my car, borrowed some money on my, what was it then? It was MasterCard or whatever it was for a new kitchen or whatever I said. And I got to about 10 grand, went to the bank, and they'd say, yeah, well, we'll give you another 10 grand. So I got to 20 grand. It wasn't rocket science, but if you really want to be successful, small things like that don't let them get in your way. It's perseverance really, and being determined, and crossing bridges when you need to cross the bridges.
Did you have the vision from going from one shop to 200 shops? Did you see that, or was it difficult?
No, I never wanted to just run 1 or 2 bed shops. I'd always wanted I couldn't envisage exactly what I did, but not far off. I wanted a successful big bed retail with lots of stores. And in the essence, once you start a store and you've got a successful formula, starting another one, it's not that difficult, because you just got to find the right store. I wouldn't use agents. I would just drive to the next town up the motorway or wherever geographically was the next town, look for something to let and negotiate a lease with the landlord, and put the blue carpet down, buy some stock, put an advert in the local paper, situations vacant, salesman wanted, have a grand opening, have a cake in the shape of a bed, invite the mayor, and on to the next one.
You make it sound so easy. Gee whiz. So tell me, how long was it before you opened your second store?
It was about 18 months. It was really
Okay.
quite quick. So the first store was too small, basically. That was my problem. I didn't realize that you needed some stock as well as the actual display stock. So yeah, it was too small. And in fact, I kept the first store as well as the second one. One was selling sofa beds, one was selling beds. And then I opened my third store in Maidenhead. And when I got to about 5 stores, I wanted to get rid of my first store, which was too small, but I couldn't really get rid of it. I was struggling to get rid of it. And someone had come to me and said, I wanted to buy a grandfather clock. And there isn't anywhere you can go to buy grandfather clocks, apart from you can go to John Lewis or you can go to Harrods or somewhere, or you can go to a second-hand shop and antique stores. But I thought, grandfather clocks are cool things. Everyone loves a grandfather clock. It's the heartbeat of your home. So, and I reckon it was all sales per square foot. And these things were a couple of grand and they only took up a square foot. So I started the Grandfather Clock Emporium in my first sofa bed shop. But then after a while, I realized I was making more money selling beds than selling clocks. So I closed that down. I always say it took too much of my time up.
Which point did you go from Division 4 to Division 3 when you had to start employing back office people, not doing the accounts yourself and really bigging it up?
Well, everyone says you've got to be able to be experienced to do everything yourself. So I would, I do the deliveries in the evening, not all of the deliveries, but I would do some deliveries in the evening myself. I do the paperwork on a Sunday because we had to be closed on a Sunday in those days. And then, I do the selling during the day. I would do it all. And then you gradually start, you get a good manager and then you get someone else, a good salesman, and you get buy a van and get some drivers, and it just sort of happens really, sort of more by instinct, I think. Choosing the right staff is, as I think we said earlier, Derek, is absolutely critical to anything. So whatever business anyone's going to run, unless you do it purely as a one-man band, you're an author or you're J.K. Rowling or you're a heart surgeon or someone that you're using your hands. If you're going to employ people, then really the skill isn't necessarily the business. The skill is actually employing the right people that are going to do whatever you want them to do, and making sure that they're loyal and hardworking and motivated and they've got the right drive and they form the right team. So that's the biggest skill in any business, I think.
Okay, you walk right into the next question then, Mike. How did you do it? Did you have a complicated interview process like some of these HR departments do, or did you just have 2 or 3 questions you asked them?
Well, I think if someone comes and they want to work in your finance department, you expect them to be good at maths and you assume they can do that. Or if they're going to be a driver, then you expect them to have not many points on their driving license and they can drive. So you sort of assume they can do the job they come for. You do have to test for that. But to me, it's all the background, that what is them. To me, if they're in an interview, they've got a mask on and they're trying to portray to me this mask, and that's not really them. Behind that mask is what their real self is, and it's trying to understand what really makes them tick. What annoys them, what makes them happy, what do they really want in life. Is this a temporary job, is it a long-term career, is it, so it's trying to find that out, and asking the normal strengths and weaknesses questions doesn't really get you there, because people are sort of coached in how to go to interviews nowadays. So I would ask them the most unusual questions that you could ever think. I'd ask people, how much do you think I weigh? And I'd say what, I would say the most outlandish things. Do you think my tie matches my shirt? Do you think, and I would ask them weird things, not because I want to know the answer to that. I just wanted to see how they'd react and whether they'd panic. So if in life or in business, everyone's under pressure at some point or other. So if they can't handle pressure, then that's a problem in itself. So I try and put them under pressure, not in a nasty way, like a bullying way, but I'd want to put them under pressure to see whether they start all going red in the face and stuttering and going all weird. So, you know, but then also I'd want to make them laugh. I remember finding someone that I thought was qualified, was good, was quite nice, quite liked them, everything was right. But somehow I didn't think they were right, but I couldn't put my finger on it. And I realized when he's talking and I'm not really listening to what he's saying, and I'm thinking what it is he's never smiled. He hasn't smiled once. So I asked him to tell me a joke. And I said, can you tell me a joke? He said, what do you mean a joke? I said, what sort of joke? I said, anything. Can be a rude joke, can be a knock-knock joke, whatever you want. And he couldn't tell me a joke. He froze. He went all weird. And not that I wanted him to tell me jokes, but I just felt, you know, there's something funny about the personality. So yeah, it's just getting into what makes people tick. I always like it if they've got, you know, why they've left their other job. You know, that's always important to me. If it was a more senior position, my wife and I used to take the employee, it's a bit sexist to assume it's a guy, but it wasn't always a guy, but saying it was a guy, and we wanted him as a marketing director or something, we'd take him out to dinner at quite a posh restaurant, but him and his wife, my wife and I would take him out to dinner and say, look, we've done 2 interviews. It's a big career move for you. It's a big decision for us. Let's go out for dinner and really, you know, have a couple of glasses of wine and really get to know each other, because you want to join the right company and I want to have the right employee. And the trick of that dinner was always my wife chatting to her, and she would say, oh no, we don't like to go on holiday because of, and they'd say something funny, or, you know, and she would find more out from the wine than I would talking to him. And a couple of glasses of wine always relaxes people anyway. So I would do all sorts of things at an interview. I had a guy once that drove into my car in the car park outside our head office, and a guy came for an interview and he reversed parking into my car. And my PA says, oh, Mike, the guy's come for the interview, but he's reversed into your car. And I couldn't believe it. Anyway, he said, do you want to see him, or just not? Should you just not see him? I said, no, I'll see him. So he was insured and everything, but he was really good, and I gave him the job. And then that wasn't the headlines, but it was an article in the local paper. Man, you know, bloke gives job to the man that drove into his car. So I got some PR out of it anyway.
Come on, then what was the question you asked him? First question, why did you drive into my car?
Well, yeah. But he was just nervous. You know, he said, oh, I don't know, I was nervous coming to the interview.
Wow. Okay, so you built it up. So we talked about having 5 or 10 stores. How many did you have at the end? 200?
Just over 200, yeah. So I got to know the country because I didn't know where towns were. I mean, you know, we're all fairly good at geography, but, you know, you do get to know. So every time we opened a store, I would always go to the opening. And, you know, we had a whole team that would open stores. You know, some people would, you know, set it up, and, you know, there'd be a team, and they'd be opening sort of 20 stores a year sort of thing.
And at that point, did you have, did you still own 100% of the shares? Did you, had you given them to other people? Did you have some good non-execs?
No, I never gave any shares away. I always used to say when I sold the business, I still had 100% of the shares, but actually that's a lie, because I only had 95%. I gave my wife 5%, and that was a weak moment I don't like to talk about. No, I had 100%. My wife and I had 100%. I did have 95. She had 5. It's only because I thought you couldn't own 100% of the shares yourself originally when I set the company up. Someone else had to be a shareholder, which isn't actually the case. But no, if I had a board of directors, I'd really reward them well with bonuses and targets and commissions and some sort of incentive schemes. And you know, they didn't have to have shares. You know, the shares were mine. I made that very clear from day one, but they would be very well rewarded. And I used to have incredible bonus schemes for every department. So even if in head office we'd have Hobbs, it sounds like chocolate biscuit, but Hobbs was head office bonus scheme. And then you'd have DIBS, which is drivers incentive bonus scheme. And so, you know, drivers would only get their bonus if they did so many deliveries a week that were without any damage. They didn't leave footprints in the customer's doorway, or they damaged the bed or anything like that. So they had to have a successful week, and then they'd do so many deliveries, and then they'd get a bonus. And obviously salesmen, it's easy with commissions and things like that. And it's always very controversial with salesmen's commissions as whether you incentivize the salesman individually, as whether you incentivize the store. So say you have about 6 or 7 salespeople in a store, and the manager and an assistant manager. If you incentivize each person, when someone walks into the store, everyone's pouncing on that person, trying to sell them a bed, and the customer sort of, doesn't have a very good experience. If you do it as a group bonus, that the store has to hit the target, then everyone's a bit more sort of helping each other. And also if a salesman's off one day and he spent 2 hours with the customer trying to sell them something, and then the customer doesn't buy then, but then comes back and orders it the next day, and the salesman's off, there's always a bit of argy-bargy about who gets the commission. So it got very complicated systems, but in the end we perfected them. And I'm jumping on a bit, but you're going to ask me in a minute when I sold it. I'll come back to how I run it in it. But when I sold it, that was one of the things that the private equity company thought they would change, because they'd say, oh no, Mike's too generous with his commission schemes. It's miles too complicated. So then they'd abolish my commission scheme that I'd taken 15 years perfecting and tweaking and making and dealing with all the little nuances that made it not work. So I covered every angle, and I got all the terms and conditions of everything of my bonus commission schemes exactly right. And it really incentivized and worked for the company and them. And they thought it was too complicated and too generous. So they abolished it. And then of course they lost a load of salespeople and think that because they thought they knew better. So
was it a combination of team bonus and individual bonus? Because we all hate it when someone rushes up to you and which one do you want, a red one or a blue one?
No, I agree. No, that's the whole trick, is you must never, so we'd spend massive amounts of time on sales training, and that was one of the things I used to get personally involved in myself. And it's all about just not pouncing on a customer as they come into the store, and making them feel at ease. And so one of the things I always used to say is, if you go into a store, any store, say you go into, I don't know, it's not Dixon's nowadays, but any big ticket item store, and a salesman comes up and you say, oh, good afternoon, can I help you? Well, everyone knows you're not meant to say that. So all the training says you should never ask a closed question, because the customer always says, no, it's okay, I'm just looking. So, but in the end, I never understood why I would go into a store myself and really a good John Lewis and a respectable store, and these salesmen would say, can I help you? And I thought, well, either they don't do staff training or the staff don't like it. And I remember talking at a lunch with some of my sales team once, and I was really trying to get them to be ever so honest with me. And I said, why don't you say, why don't you go up and say, talk about the weather, or talk about, what bed do you sleep on at the moment, or something like that. Why is it that you keep going and saying, can I help you? And they say, because it's easy, because we're so worried about what to say, we get nervous. So if we say, can I help you? It makes us, we don't mind saying that. We're more relaxed in saying that. But actually the customer is more relaxed in saying, no, it's okay, I'm just looking. The trick is just to ignore that the customer said, no, it's all right, I'm just looking, and said, no, that's fine, yes, by all means, have a look around. We've got a sale on at the moment. The bunk beds are half price at the moment. And over there, would you want a headboard as well as a bed? And you just like ignore the fact they said they were just looking and start talking to them. But it's actually quite a nice, it's like a human interaction where, I don't know, monkeys scratch each other when they meet or something. And humans, when they go into a store, the salesman says, can I help you? And the customer says, no, it's all right, I'm just looking. It's just like, hi, how are you? And people say fine, and they don't mean they're fine. It's just a reaction thing.
Wow, you're opening a can of worms. I want to ask you more questions, but I think we're going to move on, Mike. Okay. And I'm going to ask you to come back at some stage on this sales pitch, in the psychology of it and everything else, because I'm fascinated by it, and I know lots of people are. So come on, the crunch question is, it was your baby, you built it up from nowhere, you owned all the shares. Why did you sell it, and how did you feel on the next day?
Well, my wife had wanted me to sell it when we had about 50 stores and then like 80 stores and then 100 stores. And she was always on to like, let's sell the business because, what happens if something goes wrong? And, we've been successful, but built the business up. And, she was always on to me to sell it. And then this was then 20, when did I sell it? 2008, so 2007. And, the store had we'd started manufacturing our own beds, and we got franchises in different countries, and we were really successful. And the next step was sort of retailing in Europe and in France. We were going to do Belgium actually first, and it was some big steps I was going to do. And I kept thinking, well, I keep being successful, but maybe there is a step that I'm going to get to, and it's a step too far, and I'm not going to be successful, and then it's all going to come crashing down. So, maybe I'm being a bit sort of greedy and keep trying to build this business up. So maybe I should sell it. So, but then if you go to sell a business, if you've never sold a business before, I knew how to sell beds, but I didn't know how to sell a business, and I'd never sold a business. So it's quite a daunting process. Who do you go to? They talk about all these, it's like going into the Lion's Den, into the city, and there's all this sort of special talk and all this vendor due diligence and information memorandums and all these corporate lawyers, and it's a whole minefield of different language, and that was so important to me that if I was going to sell my business, it had to be a bloody good deal. So you eventually get some corporate lawyers, you get some corporate sort of estate agents, as I call them. They hated me calling them that, but basically that's what they were. They're trying to sell your business. You whittle it down to 2 or 3, and you have a bit of competitive tension. So I was lucky that the timing was very good, in that it was just before Lehman Brothers in 2008. Corporation tax was only 10%, and we had a lot of interest. So, but it was getting very, very tight towards. I sold it on the 8th of March 2008. So it was 6 weeks away from corporation tax going up to what was it going from 10% to 8%, because it was unlimited taper relief, and then Lehman Brothers crashed. So to me, timing was really important.
How supportive were the banks, Mike? We got a few bankers on here. I don't mean to go into too much detail, but was your original bank supportive of you, or were you being caught?
Not really. I mean, what it needed was banks to support the private equity. So the private equity company that eventually bought us was supported by 3 individual banks, and no one bank wanted to take all the risk to put the money up to the private equity. So 3 banks sort of triaged together, and I'll never forget, in Alan and Overy's meeting room 158 or something, and it's these huge, great, massive buildings, and everyone has their own lawyers. So I had my own lawyers, private equity had their own lawyers, each of the 3 banks had their own lawyers. Then my management team, that weren't me, but the rest of the board, had their own lawyers, and there's all these lawyers. It's just like massive costs, and everyone had their own room where they would go and have breakouts to, and it just got so complicated. But eventually it got across the line.
Yeah, your timing was fantastic, actually. More I think about this, this was before the big crash, when money was easy to come by, private equity. What did private equity think they were going to do with the business? Increase the profits by 50%?
Yeah, absolutely. They thought they'd do it overnight, and they outsourced the delivery, we used to do it internally, and they changed a lot of things. And within 5 years, they'd run the business into the ground, and it went bust and went to a pre-pack. So I'd put 20 million back into it, but which I lost. But they were just being too greedy, really. They thought they knew better. It's sort of quite so I had no control, because I didn't have a seat on the board. I'd bought 20 million pounds worth of shares in the new co. But they thought they knew this business better than me, and I'm saying, don't do that, because that won't work. No, don't do that, because that won't work. I've tried that before. No. And I'm trying to help them because I've got money invested, but they thought they knew better. And you think, it's like a bit of an insult, but it's also like stupidity, that how can they really think they knew better? And I'm trying to help them anyway. But hey
Did
ho.
they keep you? Did they keep you on as a consultant on the 8th of March, or did they just say bye bye, Mike?
No, bye. I said that, and I said I wasn't. I said I don't want to be working for someone else. I said I don't want to earn out, and I don't want all that. I wasn't in for that. I said I'll reinvest and just as an investment, but I don't want to be in there. I did end up doing some free, helping them for free, really, because they came to me and said, "Mike, it's all gone pear shaped. What should we do?" And I tried to help them, but it was a sort of bit too late, really. But there we are. It's fine now. It's now been bought by another private equity company, and they've turned it all around, and it's doing really well.
And they're using your tips.
Well, I like to think they would. I still own the head office. They still pay me some nice rent for the head office, but that's about my only involvement.
Okay. Well, anyone's got any questions for Mike on that areas? Don't forget to put them in the chat box. Short, sharp, specific questions. Mike, can we turn to that hotel in the Solent, Spithead Forts? I was going to ask you, why did you buy it? Because I thought that's a bit too blunt, isn't it? But we know each other well.
Yeah, well, when I'd sold the company, it's I thought you think you're Midas and everything turns to gold and you think you're really brilliant. But basically all I could do was buy and sell beds really well. But and anything else I did wasn't quite as successful. And there's a lot of people that are in that similar sort of situation. I bought really unusual properties. So I bought a monastery in Worcestershire that I'd spent 6 million on doing up. I bought 3 castles in Scotland, a chateau in Wales, and 3 forts in the Solent. So it was my love of unusual buildings that I wanted to restore and save. So there was a genuine sort of passion about that. But I didn't want to just do it just purely for the love of it. I wanted to try and make them commercial. My idea was to use them as venues for weddings or conferences or milestone birthdays or anniversaries. So to me, if you have a hotel with bedrooms and restaurants and lounge areas, then if everyone comes at the same time, whether there's a bride and groom or whether there's a chairman and it's a conference, everyone turns up together, everyone eats the same food at the same time, and it just seems an easier thing than people checking in and checking out and trying to run it like a hotel. So my concept was exclusive use hire of these different venues, which didn't really work. So I didn't really get my marketing right. I didn't really, I'd rushed. I was doing too many at once. So in the end, we turned them into hotels, and then I sort of looked at myself and thought, I'm running hotels, and they're like a nightmare. Everyone's complaining about, the chef or, there's so many ways in running a hotel that's complicated, and it's everything I didn't want to do. So I went about selling them off, and I've still got the forts left. Oh, 2 of the forts anyway.
And you sold the hotels and the monastery?
Yeah. Yeah. I sold all those, yeah.
Oh,
I didn't really make much money on them. I sort of broke even on what I'd spent on buying them and doing them up. But it was a great journey. I sort of feel I've left something in society that I've renovated and there's something nice about it, but didn't really make a lot of money. I wouldn't recommend doing it if you want to make a fortune.
And Spithead Fort's closed at the moment. I did look it up on TripAdvisor. They wanted £999 for me to stay there. It was closed.
Yeah, no. Well, we closed it when COVID broke out, and it was sort of a bit of an excuse, really. I want to sell them anyway, and it's running them. They wasn't making money, so I used the opportunity to not furlough everyone, but make everyone redundant, which has been fine. Everyone's happy with that.
And you've what do you do on the charity front, Mike? You said 300 different charities, or did I get that wrong when we were speaking on Saturday?
No, on the charity thing. So we're not a charity that. So it's called the Clare Foundation. It's not a charity that makes you cry and tugs at your heartstrings and makes you give them money. The Clare Foundation helps other charities to become more commercial and efficient. So we try and just help charities be more commercial and entrepreneurial. Basically, charities are run just the same as a business, and they've got an HR department, an IT department, and they employ staff and pay rent. But quite often they're volunteers and they're nicey people, nice to have as your neighbour, or they're church-going people. They're nice, honest people, but they're not very commercial. So we try and help these sort of charities to be a bit more a bit more business-like in the way that they run their charities, so that more of their money goes to their beneficiaries rather than just get wasted on administration.
Brilliant, brilliant. Well, we're nearly coming to the end of our recorded time, Mike. That's been absolutely brilliant. I'd like to dig down another time on some of those sales techniques and the negotiation techniques that you and I have in common, but talk about it in a slightly different way. And by the way, everybody, Mike's coming on the top masterclass on the 4th of November, and he's kindly sponsored it from one of his charities. So thanks very much for that, Mike. So if you want to,
I'm looking forward to it.
Meet Mike in person, do join Graham and I for 17 tips in 17 minutes, or 17 sessions in 17 minutes each. Mike, the last question I ask everybody: if you had one tip that was absolutely crucial for people going forward in 2022-23, what would it be?
Well, it's not very exciting. I sort of feel like there's this magic thing that I could tell people and it would really help them in their business or something, but it's not. To me, it's like specialize in one thing and don't keep doing lots of different things. Specialize in one thing that you love and you enjoy, because otherwise you're going to hate it, and just work hard. To me, it's perseverance, it's about determination, and it's just about not giving up. So it's hard work, and that's a bit boring, but it is what makes you successful more than anything else. So I always say you need to be successful, you need a little bit of luck and a little bit of skill. You don't need to be Einstein or something, and you need to work hard. But they're not on equal quantities. It's not a third of each of those. You need only maybe a little bit of skill and a little bit of luck, but you need shed loads of hard work. And it's just perseverance and just deciding what you want to do and sticking to it and keep perfecting it and being better than your competitors. I don't see it that complicated.
No, it sounds like running dreams was a lot easier than running in a hotel, from what you said.
No, absolutely.
More moving parts. Mike, Clare, thanks for joining Monday
okay.
Night Live today. And will you come back and join us again and talk about some of those psychological sales tips that you mentioned?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I'd love to. Brilliant.
If you're watching this on YouTube or listening to this on the Negotiations podcast, thanks for joining us. Don't forget to join us live at one Monday night. And could I ask members today to give Mike the usual round of applause?
Thank you very much. Looks funny when it's on mute, but thanks anyway.